Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Gaming in the Wild, a video games podcast about games from the artistic, creative side of the tracks, from indie to AAA. My name's John, I'm your host. I'm a journalist based out in Reykjavik, Iceland. And today, as our rainy late summer, early autumn continues, I've got some vegetable soup bubbling on the stove downstairs slowly, and I've got some flatbreads rising, which I'm going to cook on a pan. I've been doing these really nice pan breads lately, so I'm really getting into the spirit of autumn. I'm not sure how it is where you are. I know that Iceland is a bit of a specific spot in terms of our short summer, so maybe you guys still have summer going on. But here, it's definitely over. But it leaves a lot of time for games, and today I'm going to talk about two games that have come out this year, both indie titles, both super interesting. The first one, we're listening to the music now. It's called The Last Campfire. It was released by Hello Games earlier this year. The company that was behind a show favourite, No Man's Sky, that I got obsessed with earlier in the year. This is only the second game they've ever released. It's a very different proposition, kind of a dark fantasy puzzle adventure. And then later in the show, we'll move on to talk about another 2020 game, another puzzle game, first-person one this time, with heavy influences from games like Portal, The Witness, and Antechamber. This one's called Superliminal. And then finally, I'll touch on some of the news of the week, which is the PlayStation 5 Direct, including the price announcement for that new console. I'm not especially a new consoles type of guy, as you probably have noticed from the fact that I just managed to pick up a PlayStation 4 earlier this year. But it's interesting news nonetheless, and there are some good games coming to that platform. So, out of step with the tradition of this show, I'm actually covering a bunch of new stuff this time, which is a little bit of novelty. And as those games have been out for a month or two now, there's also the possibility that they'll be having a little post-release sale coming up soon, so maybe you can pick them up yourself and try them out if you like how they sound. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in with the first game of the episode, and that's The Last Campfire. So I was pretty interested in this one, primarily because of the art style of it. When it first came out, I'd caught the trailer on the Nintendo release announcement, and I'd planned to pick it up on the Switch. It's a very striking fantasy game. The main character is this small, squat, cute, cloaked figure with a couple of dark eyes, and he's just running around in a mysterious world full of forests and caves and interesting creatures. So it had already caught my attention, and I'd fully intended to pick it up. And then I was very happy to see that it's come to Apple Arcade. So it was one of those games that you hope to play, and then you get the added bonus that it's going to help you justify your Apple Arcade subscription, because regular listeners will know that I subscribed to it earlier this year to play Manifold Garden, and I've ended up playing Neocab and Bleak Sword and a few other games that I've played and covered on the show, but I haven't been on there super often. So I got it as part of my subscription. I downloaded it onto the Apple TV, spent a while trying to remember how to pair up a DualShock. Seems to be a little more hassle than it should be, because you have to unpair it to get it on your PS4 again, so you have to repair it every time. But once I'd got that little bit of housekeeping out of the way, and the all-important purple light had appeared on the DualShock, I dived right in. And it has a great introduction. You'll see a cutscene of these little embers, they're called, the little cloaked figures rowing down a dark cave. You yourself are the last in the line. You see your friends rowing into an underground cavern with a blue flame flickering inside, but you drop your oar and you're swept down a tunnel by the current into a dark place where there are crazy, evil-looking, thorny roots that close the way back. And so you wake up on a strange shore, all alone. And soon enough you discover that there are other boats here too. Others have come before you. You find the skeleton of another Ember who has a leather bag. So you pick up the bag. Your little tentative character pulls it off this skeleton that crumbles away. And this is how you come to be in the strange underworld that is the environment of this game. And the perspective that this game has as a player is an interesting one. It's a little bit like a short hike in that it's almost top down, but not really. You can't control the camera with the right stick as you can in many games. The camera just kind of shifts of its own accord. So if you can walk into a kind of a large tableau, which is maybe 6 or 8 screens wide, as you approach points of interest, the camera will zoom in, and as you walk away again, it will zoom out. It takes a little bit of getting used to, because we're all used to those self-guided camera games, but it does work well in this game. I had no problems with it. The animation and the art style are really nice. It's kind of a clean, polygonal graphic style. It reminded me most of all of Spyro the Dragon, actually. It's just very clean and appealing and cute. This one has a more of a muted palette than Spyro, but something about it had that kind of slick, almost cartoon feel. And as you wander around this kind of really interesting map, you come across a wide variety of other characters. You come across other Embers, like yourself, but they are grey mostly. They're kind of greyed out. It's like they are Embers that have gone out. They've lost their flame. They've become like an ashen palette, and they're just kind of slumped against rocks, or some of them are sitting on a boulder with dramatic beams of sunlight coming down onto them. And when you approach these Embers, you can kind of commune with them. You can look inside what's going on in their mind, which is presented as a kind of a puzzle. And by untangling the puzzle, you can bring light back to them. You uncage a blue flame, you take it back to the ashen Ember, and then they'll wake up in a daze, unsure of how they lost hope and ended up where they were, but thankful to you for bringing them back to life. And the Embers that you have reawoken as you wander the landscape, you have to solve little environmental puzzles on your way, like burning away thorns or jumping across lily pads, things like that. And the Embers that you rescue will come together at a campfire, which is nearby. Each area of the game has a campfire, and you can talk to them there. You can talk to the little Embers that you've rescued. The campfires are overlooked by these friendly ghosts who keep the Embers safe. You can see them like eating a snack or just kind of resting, waking up as they come back from their depressed slumber. And then when you've found enough Embers from one area, you can move on to the next. And as you go, you're told a story by a really nice voiceover, actually. It's read by, let me see here, a voice actress called Rachel August, whose Twitter profile said that she's British, Norwegian, Icelandic. But she reads to you the story of the Embers, and she does all of the voice acting pretty much, and really helps to give it this kind of fairy tale feel. When I first saw the game and heard Rachel's voice acting, I assumed it was a Scandinavian game because it kind of has that look about it too. But it's just the actor that they chose. And she does a wonderful job. She helps to add a kind of a quiet magic to the proceedings. Each Ember that is turned to grey is known as a forlorn. So they are travellers on their journey that you're taking yourself, that lost hope along the way and faded away. And as you are solving the puzzles that will bring the blue flame back to these forlorn Embers, each time you make a successful move in a puzzle, you'll get a line of kind of semi-poetic, philosophical dialogue from the storyteller. He'll say something like, they'd become so lost, they were starting to find the way, and things like this. And it gives it a nice fairy tale feel. The puzzles themselves, they're an interesting mix. Some of them are pretty perfunctory, like the solution is very obvious. And then others, there's a handful of them. I would say only 3, 4, 5 in the whole game that are kind of fiendishly difficult. There's one in particular where you have to pass across some floor tiles with symbols on them. And I must have spent 20 minutes walking across these floor tiles trying to figure out the right sequence and dropping into the abyss. And it turned out that it was a very subtle environmental cue that I hadn't picked up on because it just looked like background. And there are a couple of logic puzzles that take some good lateral thinking to get through. But most of it is pretty light. They're quite enjoyable, and they break up the game really nicely. And while there is an overarching story to the game, it's a very vague one. Like, we know that these embers have lost hope, we know that they are going somewhere, but it remains quite vague. It's not so much of a plot, it's more like a kind of a mood, if you know what I mean. There's no specific storyline. Like, we do come across a forest king, the ghosts are there to shepherd the small embers that you found. We don't really know where the embers have come from, we don't really know where they're going, we don't really know why the king is there, or where we really are. None of that stuff is really filled in, so a lot of it is left quite vague, and you kind of end up not really minding about the plot or caring about it. It's not the main focus here. I think I would have liked a little more specificity in terms of resolution and letting me know, for example, when we're moving through some large ancient machines and we have no inkling of who put them there or what the civilization is that we're moving through or anything like that, which is it's a choice. It ends up meaning that the plot doesn't really matter to the game. So whilst it is nice enough, it's lacking in terms of more concrete storytelling. But the game is so nice to look at, it sounds good, it plays well, the puzzles are appealing, the characters are appealing. We'll meet a chef who's lost faith in their recipes and we have to get them ingredients. We'll meet a fisherman who's kind of lost his confidence. We'll meet a giant frog who's very concerned about some things that are going on in this underground realm, and the forest king himself. And we'll meet other embers along the way who are questioning their own journey. There's a general feeling in the game of it being about hope and the loss of hope. There's a slight existential flavour to it, with embers wondering why they should carry on, if they should carry on, and what the point is of it all. So the game does kind of skirt around the edges of some of the big questions of life, but it never really gets its teeth into it beyond that, and ends up feeling like mood music for this adventurous aesthetic puzzle game. But I have to say, I finished the game in one sitting. It took me 6 hours almost on the dot to complete. That's without 100%ing it. In some areas you can find 5 different embers, and then there are 2 kind of dotted circles of sort of secret or hidden embers that you can find. And one Twitter friend who is called Kame Hammerin, with a K, said that he went back and 100%ed it. He said, "I just got the platinum on Monday and I loved every minute of it." I also got a nice note from fellow games podcast Time Played 3HR. You should definitely look them up. And they said, "Been playing this one too. It's nice and chill. I like a puzzle game where the solving of the puzzles isn't hard. You just kind of coast through it." And I agree with that. I got stuck, I think 3 times in total in that 6 hours, and the rest of it was just nice little brain teasers, more like the easy crossword in the newspaper rather than the heavyweight cryptic one. So that's The Last Campfire. It's a really enjoyable game. It's on Switch, it's on all of the major consoles, it's on Apple Arcade. If you have got Apple Arcade, I wouldn't recommend playing it without a controller. It's definitely an iPad and Apple TV and a paired controller kind of game. You don't really want to be playing this one on a touchscreen, which is part of the reason why I haven't used Apple Arcade too much. I kind of wish that there were more specific iPhone games on that platform. But The Last Campfire is a welcome addition nonetheless. Definitely play it with a controller. Otherwise, it's on Switch and it's well suited for that. I played this one on my Apple TV and big screen, and I have to say I've been playing a lot of games on undocked Switch lately, and it was quite a welcome change to sit down and fire up the speaker, get the music nice and loud, and to see those colours on a big screen in 4K. It was a really enjoyable way to play it. But it is also available on Switch, and you could just as easily enjoy it on that platform. I did see a few people on Twitter who played it on the Switch saying that they suffered some game-breaking bugs. I didn't experience anything that serious. There were a couple of glitches. There's one point where the camera, if you row to a certain area, kind of vanishes into a cliff, so you're looking out with all of this broken polygon junk on the screen. It did slow down occasionally. And at the end, there's a part where you're rowing and there's no oar in your ember's hand. So there were a couple of glitches, but nothing too serious. So it's a gentle puzzler, gentle adventurer with a vague, poetic story and some good aesthetic visuals and characters and art direction. If that sounds like your cup of tea, maybe you would enjoy The Last Campfire. The second game I'm going to talk about today is Superliminal. It came out in 2019 for Windows, but the real release, in inverted commas, was 2020 when it came out on all of the major consoles and got a fresh burst of publicity. It was directed by Albert Shi, who started the game as an undergraduate way back in 2013. So it's one of those really nice games that was started as a college project and came through a long process, and the designer really stuck with the idea and believed in it, and has come through all of the hurdles necessary to finish the game. And it definitely does have that feel. It has that feel of a grand idea of a game. You wake up in Somnosculp Dream Technology Lab, which is a dream therapy medical facility, and you are welcomed. You wake up in a bedroom, walk out into a corridor, into a reception area, so it has that kind of institutional sort of feel about it. But quickly you realise that something is up, there's no one at reception, and you're wandering through a series of rooms. There's a sense of the uncanny, a sense of the strange, a little bit like in Portal, which I'll be talking about a lot during this little review. There is a central magical mechanic around which most of the puzzles hinge. In Portal, obviously, it's creating portals in the wall which you can travel through. In this game, it is all about forced perspective, which means that if you look down onto a table and pick up a chess piece, and then you look up towards the ceiling, when you let go of the chess piece, the perspective will have shifted, and it will have become huge, and it will crash down to the ground on the other side of the room. The example that Albert Shi gives of a forced perspective to make people understand easily is like when people do a selfie or have a picture taken where they are, for example, holding the Statue of Liberty between their fingers in the background, or people leaning against the Leaning Tower of Pisa as if it is the same height as them. So the game uses that trick of perspective to create all kinds of really interesting puzzles. But it doesn't end there. The game is innovative throughout, so sometimes it's about picking up an object to land it on a switch by making it bigger or smaller. Later in the game, there are all kinds of innovations. I'm not going to spoil some of the big ones here, but sometimes you have to look around a room and you have to take environmental cues that will clue you in on what you're supposed to be looking for. Sometimes you might pick up like a spotlight, and rather than manipulating it to use a switch, you have to use it to illuminate dark corners of a space. The game also employs a lot of different kinds of optical illusions to kind of surprise you, and it does. I was constantly surprised by this game. There were a good few moments during the playtime when an optical illusion completely got me, if you know what I mean. For example, it's not too much of a spoiler to say that if you're walking towards something, sometimes it won't turn out to be there. Sometimes your expectations are confounded. Sometimes you'll walk around a room and you'll see splotches of paint all over the place, but as you reach a certain perspective, they'll all congeal into an object which you can then pluck out of the air. Things like this. There's a constant flow of really effective trompe-l'oeil, like eye-fooling trickery that it's really enjoyable to play through. There's a definite Hall of Mirrors feel to the whole thing, but it's not all good, unfortunately. I know the game is inspired by Portal, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's a little too close to home sometimes. You know, The whole kind of narrative of Portal, where you start in an institution that you're supposed to trust and you come through these test scenarios, but it slowly unravels and becomes obvious that something is wrong, and you'll kind of slip out between the pristine white walls of the institution and find yourself in a backstage area where there's just stuff lying around and you feel like you're not supposed to be. You'll sometimes discover scribbles in Portal from a mysterious figure who's been trying to pass messages or something like that. And you also have that single magical ability that helps you solve all of the puzzles. And that entire narrative, mood, and game framework is lifted wholesale into Superliminal. So the plot is very similar and the scenario is very similar too. And that is a bit of a shame, because Superliminal does feel like a game that contains a lot of ingenuity and imagination in the puzzle design and in the mechanics, but the scenario and the narrative are really too close to home for it to really feel like an original game. It's not out of the realms of possibility that if this had come out as like a Portal add-on, I wouldn't have questioned it. It's really that close to Portal. But there is a lot to like about it. It's an enjoyable time if you enjoy puzzle games like The Witness and so forth. This is a bite-sized game that will definitely scratch that itch. Also, if you're into kind of reality-bending movies like Inception and Existenz, the lesser-known but equally brilliant David Lynch film, or those kind of movies that will confound your expectations, pull the rug out from under you, like the Shutter Island style, where everything's weird and strange, then this is definitely a game for you. There are some really nice details in there. For example, the kind of the tinned background music that will play as you're walking through the institute. It's supposed to be very commonplace, like a dentist waiting room kind of vibe, but in a situation where your expectations of reality are being upended constantly, it becomes very creepy. And there are creepy moments in this game. There are sections where there's a kind of perceived threat against you. There are times when it's very easy to feel lost. There are a couple of really, really fiendish puzzles where you have to take big leaps of imagination to kind of figure out what's going on. I'm not ashamed to say that I did look up a couple of the solutions after spending, if you spend like 15 minutes walking in a circle and you've ground to a halt in your progress in the game, I don't know, maybe you're the kind of person that will put the game down, go away, think about it, but I actually get frustrated. It gets under my skin, and I find myself feeling kind of mad about it. So I did go to a guide a couple times just to get going. I don't feel any guilt about it or anything, because some of those puzzles, I'm not sure I would have arrived at the correct solution, no matter how long I'd looked at them. There's one specific tunnel where you walk down the tunnel, you look right, there's a dead end, you look left, there's an opening, but the opening leads back to the start of the tunnel, and then maybe you look left and there's a dead end, and you look right and there's an opening, and it's just quite difficult. Even after looking up the solution, I don't think I would have arrived there, basically. But as the game progressed, it winds up to quite a cool conclusion. It really does feel worth the journey. I enjoyed it, so I know I've been a little bit down on the game for being derivative, but that said, it's very well put together. It's a nice addition to this genre, even if it is something of a genre piece. So if you're a fan of this kind of thing, you'll know what you're getting. That's Superliminal. So that's what I've been playing in the last week. I had a really good time with those two games. They're both really enjoyable, they're both really well made. It's a good pair of 2020 games. But there is still lots more to come this year, especially because it's going to be the launch year for the new Xbox Series S and Series X consoles, and for the PlayStation 5, with Sony releasing the price of the PlayStation 5 pretty transparently in response to Xbox's price reveal. And they come in pretty similar. The full fat PS5 is $500 or £449, and the Xbox comes out at $499 or £429, so pretty comparable. Then the PS5 digital, which is literally the same console just without a drive, a CD drive, comes in at $399 at £359. And then the cheaper Xbox, which is a Series S, which is actually not just a driveless console, but it's actually quite a kind of cut down console in terms of power, and doesn't do full 4K and things like that. That comes in at $299 or £249. So there are some options there for people that are looking to get into the next generation. Obviously, like the internet has gone wild. Gamer Twitter is kind of everywhere you look. There are comparison diagrams with like different clock speeds and GPUs and teraflops readouts and all of this kind of stuff, with people kind of defending the console company that they prefer. But I mean, I think most of us are kind of keeping an eye on the consoles, interested in getting to the next generation. But I mean, I myself am not quite sure which one I would go for. I mean, the Series S makes a really good argument at that price, but then without the full 4K, it's not exactly future-proof. The PS5, with digital prices, with game prices going up, the digital is the most tempting for me, because I mean, we don't get a lot of physical games here in Iceland anyway, or a lot of the games that I would like to play are indie games and don't get physical releases for a long time. But without the option of a drive to play second-hand games, high digital prices could be a problem for users of that console. So there is a lot to consider. It's going to go on and on, I'm sure, online. I'm not exactly sure what I'll do. I think I'll probably just stick to my PS4 for a while, because part of the release and something that's driven Sony fans up the wall, or at least a certain section of them, is that some of the main flagship titles of the PS5 will also be available on the PS4. So the one game that actually made me want to upgrade, the Horizon Zero Dawn sequel, Horizon Forbidden West, will be on PlayStation 4 anyway. So I think I'll probably just pick it up for that. So yeah, that was the news. Not sure how you guys are all feeling about it. The conversation is going on Twitter. You can find me there at Gaming in the Wild. You can also find me on Twitch, YouTube, and Instagram, also at Gaming in the Wild. I picked up a bunch of games in the PlayStation sale, one called Adrift and one called Virginia, and I might try streaming some of those. They're just kind of, £5 picks that I took a gamble on. So I'll be on Twitch. I'm always on Twitter talking about it. Let me know what you think about those next generation consoles. Let me know if you've played The Last Campfire or if you've played Superliminal, if you enjoyed them. Always happy to get feedback. So thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and each other. See you next time. Bye bye.